All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Tuleyome's June Nature and You lecture. I'm Jeff Ben, Tuleyome's Education Associate. If you don't know, Tuleyome is a conservation nonprofit based in Woodland, California. Our mission is to engage in advocacy and active stewardship with diverse communities to conserve, enhance, restore, and enjoy the lands in the region. The region that we focus on is the northern inner coast range and neighboring areas of the Central Valley. We particularly focus on the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, which we recently helped lead the effort to expand. In addition to our public lands advocacy work, we also do a variety of education programs, including K-12 field trips, natural history articles in our newsletter and local newspapers, and of course, this monthly lecture series. We also run a range of adventures programs, including hikes, trail building days, wildflower tours, and our youth boot bank, which provides free loans of hiking boots to kids. If you'd like to learn more about these or any of our other projects, you can do so at tuleyome.org. All right, on to tonight's lecture. This lecture series is supported in part by donations from folks like you. So if you haven't already done so and are able to, we greatly appreciate a donation to support the good work that we do. We are very lucky to have Madeline Drake with us tonight. Madeline is the Deputy Secretary for Biodiversity and Habitat at the California Natural Resources Agency. Madeline has a background in biology with a BS in marine science from the University of South Carolina and a master's in animal sciences from UC Davis, where she studied heat stress response in limpets. Tonight, she's going to be talking to us about 30 by 30 in California. During Madeline's talk, we ask that you keep yourselves on mute, hang on to any questions until the end, at which point we will have time for some Q&A. All right, Madeline, thanks again for being here. The floor is yours.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Jeff. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Can you confirm all's good? Great. Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I had, the ultimate privilege of working with Tuleyome in the expansion of Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument a few years ago. So appreciate all the incredible work that you all are doing. And I'm so happy to be here to talk about 30 by 30. It's my favorite thing to talk about, even on a Thursday evening. So, today I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing kind of statewide, what kind of got us to where we're at, what's the latest and greatest that we've been working on, and ways that you all can get involved and stay engaged with where we're at and moving forward to 2030. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about how conserving California really takes all of us. So as Jeff mentioned in my background, I wasn't originally from California. I actually grew up in Ohio, went to school in South Carolina, came to grad school at UC Davis, and I just absolutely fell in love with California. We have beaches, we have mountains, I can go scuba diving, I can go surfing, I can go skiing, I can go snowshoeing, camping. Just the incredible natural resources that California has really made me fall in love with this place and make me want to sort of stay here and continue my career here. And so while I love all these things, selfishly, I don't want to see any loss of these things. But furthermore, I know how important these things that I love are for our community, right? So California has more biodiversity than any other state in the continental US. We are considered a biodiversity hotspot because of the incredible biodiversity that we have, the endemic plants that I know you all worked really hard that exist on Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument. But being a biodiversity hotspot also means that our biodiversity is at risk. And so when we see headlines like humans are speeding extinction and altering the natural world at an unprecedented rate, or humans have pushed the climate to unprecedented territory from landmark UN report, or climate change could displace 200 million people within their own countries by 2050, or biodiversity crisis affects billions who rely on wild species. These are all mainstream headlines, right? The New York Times, the Washington Post, LA Times, these are newspaper articles that my parents read who aren't scientists. And so people are seeing these headlines and it's very doom and gloom, right? And so, again, selfishly, I don't want to lose the opportunities I love here in California. I don't want to miss out on my next camping trip and hiking trip. But importantly, I know that our communities rely on nature for our own critical human health and well-being. And I know that you all do as well, right? Like we need nature for our food, we need it for our medicines, we need it for our houses, we need it for our clothing, we even need it for the air we breathe. So, it's not only the like things that I love and have fun and nice to have, but it's also the things that I need to survive that we really need for nature and that all of you do as well. And so when we're seeing all these doom and gloom articles, but know that we really need these habitats to sustain our communities, well, what can we do? Well, I hope that I'm here to talk about a message of hope with you all tonight, and that is 30 by 30. And so this is a global initiative actually to conserve 30% of lands and waters across the world. And it might sound just like a catchy number, right? Like 30 by 30, it's such a great tagline. And like, is it actually based in any type of science? Well, yes, it is. Scientists from all over the world actually came together to say they think that if we can conserve 30% of our lands and waters across the world, then we'll have a fighting chance against those biodiversity and climate crises that we face. And so, yes, it is a catchy number. It is a fun catchphrase. It is a rallying cry, but it is based in the global scientific community really thinking that we have a chance to really have hope for our future. And so, California, being the environmental leader that it is, wanted to be involved in that, right? We are an economic power on the global stage, and we are, as they say, when California goes, so does the rest of the nation. So, we want to be nation leading in this aspect as well. So, that's why in October of 2020, Governor Gavin Newsom signed Executive Order N 8220. And the purpose of this executive order was broadly to expand nature based solutions for California's climate change and biodiversity's goals. Real importantly, though, this is what first committed the state of California to the 30 by 30 goal to conserve 30% of our lands and coastal waters by 2030. Good news is this has since been solidified by legislation. So it is state law that this is a goal now. So we do have that certainty that it will live beyond just the Newsom administration so that we can, continue to work together to achieve the 30 by 30 goal. And then I will say 2 years later, 2 years after the governor signed the executive order, kind of back to this world stage, all of those global leaders came together in Montreal or I guess a year later in 2021, in December of 2021, to really sign on to this. So this is a global goal that many of us are working towards achieving. But California, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we're leading in this space. So before we ever put pens to paper in developing a strategy, which is what the executive order called us to do, we knew we couldn't do this alone. We really had to have our partners coming together to help us figure out what is going to be the strategy for achieving 30 by 30. California is a big state. We're about 100 million acres. So we need to conserve about 30 million acres. We need to know what's already conserved. What should we consider conserved? How do we, track these metrics? What's important to people? And so we went through a really large engagement outreach session that lasted about 18 months to really put together a strategy that our hope is that many people can see themselves in. So for this, we held 9 regional workshops all across the state. We had 5 topical advisory panels on key topics like climate, equity, biodiversity, conservation of lands, and conservation of coastal waters, so that we could really ask key experts, what are these questions that we're really struggling with? They can help us address for this strategy. And then we also had an online survey so that anybody could kind of provide answers to the questions that we were providing experts, knowing that California has a wealth of expertise, right? And we really wanted a diversity of voices to help us answer these questions. We had more than 70 tribal consultations so that we can ensure that our tribal partners felt included in this strategy as well. We received more than 1,000 letters when we put out our draft. We had an advisory committee that in a public meeting really talked through what worked well with the draft, what needed improvement in the draft. And then we had public meetings where anybody could come and talk if they would prefer to talk through their feedback instead of write letters to sort of give us that feedback. So we really wanted to make it a place where anybody could come and share their feedback, positive, negative, all of the above, so that this could be a strategy that we're all felt ownership in. So in April of 2022, that's when the Pathways to 30 by 30 strategy was released. And so since then, we've been working on achieving this goal. Our conservation framework, or what we're trying to achieve through 30 by 30, we have three key objectives. So that is to protect and restore biodiversity, to expand access to nature, and to mitigate and build resilience to climate change. So when we're looking for conservation opportunities under 30 by 30, we're looking for those three criteria. Not that every piece of land is going to meet check every single box, but ideally those are the criteria that we're really hoping to achieve through 30 by 30. We also have three core commitments. Again, this was really informed by that public engagement. People really want us to commit to advancing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, to strengthening our tribal partnerships, and to protecting our economic prosperity, clean energy resources, and food supply. And so really these are recognizing that conservation can't happen in silos. It can't happen in vacuums, right? We need to be working through a variety of state priorities with many, many partners so that we're achieving this goal, so that 30 by 30 is benefiting all those communities that need those natural resources to really survive. So Pathways to 30 by 30, it came out again in April of 2022, and then we've been on the path since then, working towards achieving this goal. So really importantly, when we released our strategy, we had to think about how are we defining what we mean by 30 by 30 conservation areas. So after, again, lots and lots of input, the conceptual definition is land and coastal water areas that are durably protected and managed to sustain functional ecosystems, both intact and restored, and the diversity of life that they support. So there's two key things to that definition. One, it has to have a durable protection to it. So it can't be a land that could be sold tomorrow. It could be things like there's an easement on it, or it's owned in fee title by somebody that's focused on conservation and has some type of agreement that it won't be developed by some other type of deed restriction. It could also be public trust lands and have some sort of extra protection on it, but it has to be durably protected. And then the second key piece is that it has to be managed for biodiversity. It can have other management pieces to it as long as biodiversity is one of the main purposes of that protection. So there can be things like restoration. There can be working lands where either, cattle potentially are acting as natural grazers on the land to help manage the landscape for that natural ecosystem, or even places where, wildfire resilience or very low intensity timber harvest is happening so that it's sort of maintained in a forest structure that replicates sort of that natural transition of forests. So what we're looking, again, durably protected and then managed for biodiversity. Those are the two key things to count towards a 30 by 30 conservation area. So where are we at? Well, we are at 26.1% of our lands and 21.9% of our coastal waters. So doing pretty well. Since we released our Pathways to 30 by 30 strategy, we've added more than 2.5 million acres. So that has been an effort of improving our data, of adding new areas like those national monument expansions and new national monuments in California. And it's also, been, grant programs that we've had at the state, right? We had a great nature-based solutions pot of money, and then now we have the climate bond, which I'll talk about later in my talk as well. So this is sort of where we're at, but to give you all an idea where we need to go, we need about 4 million more acres of land to conserve. So we really have to keep up the momentum. We also need about 280,000 acres of coastal waters. And the reason that we separate the lands and coastal waters is because the land side is, like many, many jurisdictions, right? There's local, there's state, there's federal, there's private. And then, it's a little bit of a different strategy, a really bottom up strategy versus the coastal water piece is all public trust and is, has its own unique challenges. And so for that space, that sort of line is the mean high tide line to 3 nautical miles out. And so that's the state jurisdiction in the coastal water areas and why we count them separately. And a question we get all the time is, does freshwater count? It does count. It counts under the land side. We don't map it separately because it can sometimes be really hard to map separately, right? California has a lot of what are called ephemeral wetlands, which they're wet sometimes of the year and dry other times of the year. Also, if you think about a riverbank, sometimes the riverbank's wide, sometimes it's narrow, right? So we just group it all into the land side, but freshwater does count, rest assured. So for data nerds, I'm going to just very quickly stay on this slide because it's a lot of information, but we want to be transparent and empower people with the information. So the databases that we use to track our goal is the California Protected Areas Database and the California Conservation Easement Database. These have been around in California for many, many years, and so we felt like we didn't need to invent something new. We could just really invest and improve in something that already existed. So things that count towards the 30 by 30 goal that we felt met that conceptual definition that I shared on the last slide are Gap Code 1 and Gap Code 2. Those are areas that are durably protected and primarily managed for biodiversity. There are Gap Code 3 and 4. Gap Code 3 typically has extractive uses on it. So it could be sort of high intensity logging. It could be solar, things like that. Status 4 oftentimes means we don't know. And I want to bring this to your attention because there's an opportunity there. I'm going to share with you some of the mapping tools that we have that anybody can go on and see where we're at in achieving our conservation goals. And for things that might be a Gap Code 3 or even a Gap Code 4, it might be that we don't have the right information. So there's a call to action always to help us update the information and ensure that we're tracking the best that we can so that we can best understand where there's connectivity opportunities, where there's gaps in the ecosystems that we're conserving, so that we can continually improve on how we're meeting the last 4 million acres of 30 by 30. So this slide is a little bit of what counts and what doesn't count. So everything on the top row counts, everything on the bottom row does not. So you have a national park like Yosemite, right? It's a, beautiful natural space managed for biodiversity. It does have recreation in it, but it is, managed primarily in a natural state. There are things like parking lots or, lodges and things like that, and we can sort of parse those out a little bit within the data, but primarily that space is managed for natural areas. In the middle, we have a conservation easement where there are cattle acting as natural grazers and really helping with some of the vernal pools on that habitat. So again, working lands can count again as long as biodiversity is sort of at the forefront in the management of those working lands and they have durability to it. And then the photo on the right where you see heavy equipment in a forest. So that is actually previous timber harvest land up in our Redwood National and State Parks, where they're actually taking out an old timber harvest road. And so this land, it got protected. It's now part of a management plan for biodiversity. So it does count towards 30 by 30, but it is going through a restoration project. And this restoration project will likely take many years. So that's okay, right? It has that intent for management. It has that durability piece. So it does count for 30 by 30, and they are actively working to restore it to get it into that natural state that they're hoping it will be. On the bottom that don't count, so a golf course has community benefits, but doesn't count towards 30 by 30. Solar field, has community benefits. We need clean energy, doesn't count for 30 by 30. And then on the bottom right, row crops, agriculture that doesn't have that sort of natural component to it. Again, we really need it for our communities. We need food, but it doesn't count towards 30 by 30. And I will say there are things that can happen on the bottom rows that can help with biodiversity, right? Like we can encourage folks to plant native plants, or even on solar fields, think about how we can allow tortoises to move through those areas in a safe way. We can work and reduce pesticide use, right? So there are many things that we can do to help with biodiversity, even though it doesn't count for 30 by 30, and all those things are important as well. So in that strategy, we do have 10 pathways. I'm not going to go through all 10 of these pathways, but I will encourage you to read our strategy, look at the different actions that we're working to take, and knowing it's some things like acquisitions and easements, but it's also things like where can we look for existing public lands and look for opportunities to increase their biodiversity management. And so that's where we worked really hard with Tuleyome on the expansion of Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, where some of those extractive uses were taken off that land, and now it counts towards 30 by 30 because it does have that focus on biodiversity protection. As I mentioned in the previous slide about things that can be done on areas that might not count, we have a whole pathway for that, right? Because we don't want to lose that, right? I can have a pollinator garden in my backyard, and that's going to be really great for nature, right? And so we have a whole pathway for that to really encourage people to think about ways anybody can be involved. You don't have to go out and buy 1,000,000 acres, right? You can still help biodiversity in your own backyards. And then importantly, 10, we want to continue to evaluate, continue to improve. Yes, we have, a strategy document, but we have to continue to understand where are we doing well, where can we improve, what new technology is out there, what new information is out there, because the world moves fast, right? And we know a lot more even now than we did back in 2022. So we do have a series of mapping tools, and our hope for these, we didn't draw any lines on a map or anything like that because our strategy is really about empowering local communities. I sit in Sacramento, which I know is relatively close to you all, but sometimes I'm on talks with people down in San Diego or up in, Mono County, or I guess Modoc County. And so sometimes like I don't know those areas very well, and I don't feel like it's my role to draw a line on a map to say this is what should count for 30 by 30, so figure out a way, right? I feel like it's up to those local communities to say these are the things that we really value, and this is what we want to count towards 30 by 30. So we developed these mapping tools in partnership with Esri to really try to empower folks to understand some of the data that's out there so that they can make the decisions, right? And they can really empower their local communities to figure out what makes sense to really work together to conserve in their own areas. I'm going to show off a little bit of these tools. So this is our Conserved Areas Explorer, and this is where we can, it's publicly accessible and anybody can go on and see how we are at achieving 30 by 30. You can even sort of click on an area. So I clicked on Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument here. So you can click on areas and learn more about them. Are they open access? How many acres is it? Who's managing it? For things like a conservation easement on private land, sometimes that information is less than that, right? Because we don't want to sort of provide any identifying information if they're uncomfortable with it. But we do try to be as transparent as possible so people can understand what counts and how they can get out in their communities potentially and see some of these areas. You can go a little bit more in detail. So a tab at the top, you can click terrestrial detailed, and you can look even down to the county. So here I pulled up Yolo County. You can see as a county, Yolo County has conserved about 13% of the county. You can look and see what's in Gap 1 and Gap 2. Again, that's what counts for 30 by 30. You can also see what's in Gap 3 and Gap 4. And again, that might be key if you're looking to areas where maybe they just haven't reported that they have a management plan. And so maybe we need to do outreach with those groups to see, do you have a management plan? And should you count towards 30 by 30? In which case, reach out to me and we'll get them on the map. You can also look and see what's the percentage of people who manage lands in your area, whether it's federal, nonprofit, state, county, things like that. So you can look at the statewide, or you can kind of zoom in on the county level. We also have our Biodiversity Explorer, so you can look and see, okay, where is there important biodiversity? This is a layer that's managed by our California Department of Fish and Wildlife. It pulls in a bunch of different data sets, things like climate projections and species occurrence data and predictive habitat modeling. So it pulls in a bunch of information into these like hexagons to sort of provide evaluation statewide of where there's really good biodiversity. So things that are bright blue means there's higher levels of biodiversity there. This is relative statewide. Things in the yellow are less biodiversity. That is a statewide scale. So when you kind of zoom in, that changes a bit, but at a statewide scale. Terrestrial connectivity is another place where they have these hexagons. You can look and see, okay, at a statewide scale, where there are really important places for connectivity. And you can also look and see where they're really important places for climate resilience from a biodiversity perspective. So you can pull a lot of this information. And if you're wondering, okay, what should be an area that we should target next for acquisitions or easement or outreach to partners, you can kind of look and explore, okay, where are there good biodiversity or connectivity or climate resilience opportunities? You can also look and see if habitats are under or overrepresented in your area. So here I pulled data from Lake County. You can see that about 15.7% of hardwood woodlands are conserved in that area. So we don't have a goal of every, habitat needs to be at 30% or anything like that. But if you're looking to be like, what might be underrepresented in my area, this is a really good tool that you can look at. And the top is county, the bottom is ecoregion, so that's looking at statewide, and you can look and see that that's actually underrepresented statewide as well. So it could be a good opportunity if it's underrepresented in your area, it's underrepresented statewide, then maybe that's a really good habitat type to try to target and looking for new acquisitions and easements. Furthermore, if you kind of dig into the weeds a little bit more, you can look up that habitat type if you kind of click through on the bottom and say, okay, where's their high presence and low conservation, so that it can kind of help say, okay, this might be a county or an area. The pink is where that habitat exists to really try to zoom into that area and find opportunity. And then one of my favorite Explore applications that we have, because I think it's unique and I haven't really seen anything like it in other spaces, although we're working on an update right now, is you can pull census data and compare that to how close those people are to conserved areas. So here I pulled data again for Yolo County. You can see there's about 217,000 people in Yolo County, what population percentage that is of the state. And this is total population. So you can look and see the age distribution, education, housing, race, household income. It just provides those sort of census type data. Then you can go to the sort of tab that looks and says, okay, of 30 by 30 conserved areas, 3% of that population lives within a half a mile of a park. So you can think, okay, where can I conserve areas where I might be able to increase that percentage so that more people live within close access to their open land. You can also look and see the age distribution, education, housing, right? So you can start to narrow down to really look at some of those, statistics that might indicate who does or doesn't have access to nature a little bit more clearer in your area. So how are we then moving forward with all of this? Well, that's where the 30 by 30 partnership comes in. And this isn't something that somebody has to sign up for or anything. This is anybody who wants to be involved, right? Who do we want to be a part of this? Well, we want our government partners, our California Native American tribes, our community organizations and region coalitions, regional parks, resource conservation districts, land trusts, legislators, legislative staff, students, researchers, community scientists, private and public funders, people who love nature, and I hope you all are a part of us in this 30 by 30 partnership. This is really just meant to be the vehicle of partners really building this movement and making sure that this is a bottom-up initiative. We do have some key groups that really help to inform us that we meet with regularly. So we have the Biodiversity Council. This is federal and state government agencies that come together. We have the Biodiversity Network, which is a group of researchers that have decided to come together and help us with the research related to 30 by 30. Our Deputy Secretary for Tribal Affairs, Geneva Thompson, really works closely with our tribal partners, and I'll share some new and exciting work happening in the tribal space. We have our Ocean Protection Council that focuses on the coastal waters piece of it. And then we have many regional working groups and coalitions. If all of you are familiar and the area, you might have heard of Power Nature. And so that's a group of local coalitions that have come together to say, we're going to really work, in this particular region, kind of come together to say these are the places that we think are important for this region. So we really want to empower those groups. Our strategy is all about empowering those groups so that they can make the decisions and they can really kind of help us achieve that goal. And Each year, we do release a update to the Pathways to 30 by 30 strategy. This was required by the legislature, but I actually think this is a really key requirement because it makes sure that Pathways 30 by 30 isn't just on a shelf. It makes sure that we aren't reporting back to you all right. It keeps us transparent. It keeps us on track. It keeps us accountable. And so I'm really glad the legislature, even though it's a, report requirement, we try to make it fun. We try to make it like a scrapbook to be like, look at everything we did this year, and to also provide the numbers and what they are each year so that we know how well we're doing at achieving the goal. So we've released a progress report every year since our Pathways to 30 by 30 strategy. We're working on our 2026 progress report, so should be coming in the next 2 to 3 months, which we're really excited about. And then we also, again, really thinking about that pathway 10 and making sure that we're approving and adapting to the work we're doing. Look to say, where do we need some additional focus? Where are we hearing from partners that things aren't quite detailed enough or we need more direction? And so our friends at the Ocean Protection Council released a roadmap for achieving 30 by 30 in California coastal waters, kind of diving a little bit deeper into that space. And I'm really, really excited to share that our tribal affairs team, again, led by Geneva E.B. Thompson, our deputy secretary, released our tribal stewardship policy just earlier this year to really help improve our relationships and partnerships with tribe on tribal land back, tribal co-stewardship, tribal management, and all the ways that we work with tribes on conservation. So we're really excited that this new policy is out and will help guide that work in more specific ways. So a thing that's coming up on the horizon that I am going to put a plug in and hope that you all will stay a part of. There was a bill that was signed just this past fall, AB 900, and it has new requirements for stewardship. And so the requirements are going to be for our 2027 progress report. So not this one we're working on now, but the next one. And this really is a focus on how we're doing with stewardship of our lands. So this bill is going to require us to develop strategies for reducing barriers and increasing support for that long-term stewardship. It's going to add this new reporting requirement that's going to need to be included in our 2027 progress report. And we're going to have to talk about things like best practices, workforce capacity, innovative approaches, cost. And so we're really going to have to dig in a little bit deeper here. And it's also going to build out on that tribal stewardship policy in a little bit more detail. So very soon, we're working through the budget process right now, but very soon we're hoping to launch another sort of public engagement session to really kind of gather that information. And our hope is that, it's probably going to be a pretty big price tag, right, of how much it's going to cost to steward all of our lands. But our hope is to really also talk about how much ecosystem services, how much benefits our communities get from these conserved lands, and how we can really diversify our funding portfolios to help us manage these lands. So that is a new and on the horizon and coming soon. And so I hope you all will stay engaged with us, especially because I feel like the stewardship piece is really that next frontier of 30 by 30, right? It's really how 30 by 30 is going to live beyond 2030, because we're going to need to steward these lands in perpetuity. And so this will be a really important piece to have 30 by 30 live beyond 2030. So things that my team is really focused on in advancing 30 by 30 now and for the coming years, right? We want to provide informational resources. Where are places people are struggling? Where can we, get the best available information? Where can we provide clarity? We also want to facilitate connections. I love that I get to work statewide because that means that I get to meet people in all different parts of the state, and I can hear examples that are working really well in Northern California, and how can Southern California learn from those, right? Or this person's struggling with this, but I learned a solution in this area of the state. So I love that facilitating connections piece, maybe one of my most favorite parts of the job. Funding, that's really important, thinking about how we're going to fund, not only the lands that we're conserving, but how that stewardship is going to live on. Improving our data and mapping, that's going to be a continuous process. Again, that will really help us understand the connectivity, the underrepresented habitats, and really making sure that we have a full understanding of what is conserved here in California. And then, as I mentioned, that AB 900 piece. We are committed to continued engagement. So we do have regular webinars about quarterly or so, where we try to connect with people on new topics. We have local meetings and field trips that we attend. We have newsletters, blogs, social media, annual progress report, and we do have a big summit every year. And I'm excited to share this year it's going to be in San Francisco at California Academy of Sciences on September 29th. We haven't released registration yet, but I hope that many of you all will join us because it will be a great event where we really bring people together statewide and kind of celebrate what we've done and solidify where we need to move forward. As I mentioned, the climate bond, we do have a new website, and I hope that you all will make sure to sort of check it out and look for opportunities for funding in your area. So thank you to the voters of California. We did receive $10 billion in a climate bond that was passed in the fall of 2024. And so with this climate bond and with new technology, we're trying to be the most transparent and efficient as we have been, which is not usually, the government is not usually considered efficient, but we're doing our best because we really want folks to see how this money is being invested and how it's really improving our communities so that the voters can continue to support things like this. So we have a new website. It gives a full breakdown of what each of the chapters in the bonds are, and then it even provides tables of what types of projects are being funded. So again, and then many, many resources so that we can try to be as clear as possible about what programs people can apply for, what's getting funded, what some of those definitions are. And then kind of zoom out a little bit more. I mentioned this at the top. We do really continue to engage at the global scale. So we co-lead the High Ambition Coalition subnational task force with our partners from Quebec, really so that we can elevate the role of subnational governments, especially right now in the absence of a federal government leadership. It's really important for states like California to step up and say, no, this is still really important for the United States. We are making real progress, and you can too. So that's something that we take really seriously. We're also an official on the advisory committee to the advisory committee of subnational governments to the Convention on Biological Diversity. Sorry, it's a little bit of a mouthful. So a delegation of us will be headed to Armenia in October to attend the 17th Conference of Parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity. So really, again, elevating California's role, showing how we can make progress together, learning from those other countries, other subnational governments, so that we can really make sure that as a global goal, we're staying on track together. So what does success look like? I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, we did 18 months of outreach and engagement, and I had the incredible opportunity of leading the team that wrote the strategy. And so I read every letter, every comment that came in. And maybe my favorite question that we asked during that time was, what does success look like? And so these are real answers from real people. Things like cleaner waters, better air quality, more open spaces, more plants, more trees, more animals, more insects, healthy ecosystems and healthy communities, put that one on there twice, reversal of greenhouse gas emissions. Everyone can access a green space within 10-minute walk, working landscapes that aid in conservation. Our kids have the same natural world that we have, and then even better, our children live in a healthier environment than we do. So I hope that this is a future that we will realize soon, and that we will continue to realize as we build on 30 by 30 in those stewardship pieces. And I know that Tuleyome has already been an incredible partner, and I hope that you all will continue to stay involved in the work we do, because you all make a difference, and your voice is really important to be a part of the conversation. So again, join us, come to the summit, be a part of our engagement with the stewardship strategy, follow us on social media, get on our newsletter, get on our mailing list, check out these mapping tools, check out the climate bond tools. We hope that we've really empowered you all so that you can be a part of this, and we hope that we're accessible to you all, so that we can really feel like a team in this together. So thank you again for having me. Thank you for all the work you do. And I know that Sandy was going to talk a little bit about the role that Tuleyome plays in powering nature. So I do want to turn it over to Sandy. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. It's always so exciting to hear about 30 by 30. And, we're so lucky to be in California in so many different ways. It is an international level, but when it comes down to state levels, we are a force of nature as a state. We are, what is it, the fourth largest industrialized nation in the world. Our policies push policies not just nationally, but internationally. So it is very important. So Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I really want to thank everybody for joining us in Madeline. As Madeline pointed out, she has been, and so was Sienna Ray, a champion of the efforts to include Moloch Loyic into Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, and is one of our leads on California's 30 by 30 efforts. I will turn this over for questions in just a moment because I want you guys to have time, and I know we're really tight. But I want you to know how Tuleyome and other like members of the public and other organizations are advancing the 30 by 30 efforts. There's so many ways from the local to the state to the federal lever, to the federal level. Sorry, sometimes I can speak more eloquently. But on the state level, we work with Power in Nature, which is a collaborative public effort to work to achieve California's 30 by 30 goals. We're conservation groups, land trusts, researchers, hunters, anglers, OHV folks, scientists, research source conservancies, farmers, and individuals all working together to protect the 30% of our lands and waters by 2030. And we do it in a variety of different ways, depending on our expertise, but we do work in a coalition. And as Madeline pointed out, PIN is comprised of local coalitions. So, like I said, Tuleyome is part of the Sacramento North Coast and the Bay Area. There is a Sierra Nevada conservancies. There's a desert conservancy. They're very focused on the regions, and there are ways you can participate on a statewide level in topical groups like the oceans group or the public lands group, or there's a government affairs group. So we interact in a variety of ways. It's a true coalition effort. Um, um, we need that. It's going to take all of us to protect 30% of our lands and waters by 2030. And I really want to thank Sandra and Madeline's for their partnership in the efforts, and how great it has been to work with them. What I love about the partnership is we get to have conversations where we push each other to get other places and find new ideas and stuff. And so I encourage people who want to participate and be part of that really like interactive dialogue and figuring out how to go there to um, join us. If you want to know how to more to participate in the public efforts, contact Tuleyome. Um, there's a lot of ways, like I said, from getting people outdoors to advocacy, a variety of ways. I see a lot of our partners and leads here. I'm not going to thank all of them, but they are like all wonderful leaders in the community. And I see names without faces of people I've heard about, but I still haven't seen your faces. So anyway, thank you for being here and supporting Tuleyome and all the lands and everything we love. And Jeff and Madeline, take it away. And I'm sorry I cut in for even a few minutes to the Q&A. But let's all like work together, and please do contact us if you want to participate in these efforts.
Awesome. Thanks, Sandy. So we've got plenty of time for some Q&A here with Madeline. So you can either raise your hand and I can call on you, or you can drop your question into the chat and I'll relay those to Madeline. So let's start with Glenn Holstein. Looks like you're on mute there, Glenn. I will unmute. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Thanks, Madeline, for all the good work, hard work, and good words. But I'm also interested that there be more specifics. For example, among the commitments, I didn't see any commitment to every species that makes up California's biodiversity having adequate habitat to survive. I think that would be one of the most basic commitments that 30 by 30 could make. And I'd like to see that or something equivalent in there, not just words, but specifics. And we know those species. We may be not aware of some of them, but at least the ones we know, it would be very important to have every one of those species have adequate habitat to survive. I hope you'll agree with that.
That's a great suggestion. We are really all hands on deck. We'll work as hard as we can. But at the same time, I know that, there are species that need more attention and more help than others. So, our first pathway and pathways to 30 by 30 and all the different actions is to really honor some of those regional plans that do call out some specific species. It's hard to say back to back. And we do really point to our state wildlife action plan and our work as well that kind of gets more at that species specific level. And that document is over 1,000 pages. And so it's tons of information on it. But we wanted to make it inclusive. We wanted to make it all hands on deck, but it is a good suggestion to really think about, can we get every species? And I hope we can, but that will take a lot of research, a lot of work. But you're right, the information is out there. So I hope there are plans that we can point to, and I hope that we can kind of continue to sort of aim towards that goal.
Great. Rita?
Hello, I am with a group called Save Orange Hills in Orange County, California. It's 400 acres of corridor between the San Joaquin Hills and Irvine Regional Park and down to Peters Canyon Regional Park. And it is now fenced off by the Irvine Company, which owns it. And they have developed a large percentage of Orange County already. So how do we preserve this private property as a wildlife corridor?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, at the local level, groups like Power Nature, I think, can really kind of come together to say, okay, these are some of the priorities that we can all kind of get behind and do the advocacy and do the outreach to landowners and sort of kind of build those partnerships to help make that happen. We also, for folks who are interested in particular properties, we work through our California Council of Land Trust and look to see, okay, is there a land trust in that area that could be really useful? So we try to think through like who would be their best local partner to think through some of these issues. But, I know it does take a great deal of advocacy. It takes a little bit of luck and the timing, right? And, is the funding available to do that acquisition or easement at the right time? And do you have a willing landowner and things like that? Because I will say that 30 by 30 is not regulatory. It is voluntary. So we don't have any specific way to like make people conserve their lands under 30 by 30. So we try to empower people with the resources, but we don't have any kind of mandate to do something like to mandate that it must be conserved.
We're putting a little bit of public pressure on them, or a lot, but there's a petition on our website, Save Orange Hills. And also, who would I contact first?
Yeah, so I know in in the Orange County area, we have our partnership coordinating committee who is kind of our eyes and ears out on the ground. It's about 20 individuals appointed by the secretary across the state. And so I will say one of our local champions in the Orange County area, she's also a part of Power Nature, is Melanie Schlotterbeck. If you haven't already been connected with her, she is
we are connected.
Oh, great. So I think that she could be really good at sort of plugging you in with some of those groups. In the California Council of Land Trust website, they have a map, so there might be land trusts in your area. So those would be some of the starting places I might recommend, is kind of look to the existing coalitions and see where there might be partners that you might not have done outreach to yet.
Thank you.
And I do want to emphasize what Madeline said. 30 by 30 is it is volunteer. It is a voluntary effort that we're all working towards, but there are concrete ways in which the state has been implementing that and working to implement that by providing funding to put lands aside and resources in those areas. So, and I do agree that contacting the local coalitions is a really effective way to get support for what you're working on, and to get a backing of a larger group and other individual organizations. So I really encourage you to reach out in that manner.
Thank you.
All right, looks like Glenn has another question.
Yeah, one of the most basic principles of biodiversity conservation is giving the most attention and priority to the species that are closest to extinction. And that's something that I haven't heard coming from out of 30 by 30. And I'd like to see it happen because unless you focus on the areas where your greatest chances for losing biodiversity are there, you're not going to do very much to preserve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, they are under the umbrella of agencies that fall within the California Natural Resources Agency. So we do have a very close partnership with them, and work very closely with them. In the maybe good news, at least from my perspective, with some of those threatened and endangered species, is there is a regulatory tie there, right? So there are a little bit more checks and balances on what can or can't be developed in those areas, to try to help conserve. And then there are also dedicated pots of money for the recovery of those species. So definitely, in our different priorities under biodiversity, thinking about those threatened and endangered species within the 30 by 30 framework is one of the priorities that we call out. And we do certainly want to work with our California Department of Fish and Wildlife to sort of make sure we're upholding that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I had a question. Being a data nerd, I thought that the California Nature GIS website looked awesome, and I'm definitely going to dive into that. I'm curious, in your own or your staff's exploration of all of the data viewer, what are some interesting things that have come out of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I have learned a lot about data visualization, and what people are able to really take away from that data. So I will say, broader than the data itself, that is one piece I've learned, right? And anywhere where we can pull metrics, that's a really valuable tool, not only to help us understand, but also to be able to provide those metrics to decision makers very quickly, right? And so, for example, I know our Power and Nature folks recently had an advocacy day at the Capitol, and I saw some of their materials, and they were very able to quickly pull statistics on the economics of conservation, of recreation, and things like that. So I have learned a lot in data visualization and really finding way to show the metrics that show how well we're doing and where we need improvement. So on a sort of, that's been a big lesson learned from me. Again, that Access Explorer has been something that, my background was in environmental physiology. I was looking, when in my grad school studies at how animals are adapting at the cellular level. And so that Access Explorer has been a whole new world for me, right? And me being able to understand, for example, 30% of the entire state's population lives in LA County. And so if we aren't thinking about urban biodiversity, then we really need to be, right? Because that's where so many of our people live. And so I think that's been a real lesson learned for me, is to understand, how some of those census data connect with that biodiversity data. That I maybe knew the biodiversity data really well, but I didn't know that people data, and I've kind of learned how important that people data is to sort of pair with that science and biodiversity data. So personally, those are some of the things that we've really been able to dig in on. Our team as a whole, I think we've really dug a bit, also learned how we get people to report data, how we get to understand connectivity, right? And so that's been a sort of lesson as well into really helping understand, those metrics for connectivity, those metrics for underrepresented habitats, kind of more in that biodiversity space.
Awesome, thanks. I'm looking forward to digging into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vicky?
Madeline, you're mentioning urban biodiversity just now. Makes me think about some of the other benefits of paying more attention to urban issues.
Mm.
It's in our urban areas where we probably have the majority, not all, of course, but the majority of the disadvantaged communities that really need a better access to nature, which is, of course, one of the main goals of the 30 by 30 program. And if you provide more nature in our cities and do it in a way that where we connect current green areas. I live in San Francisco, and San Francisco has quite a few parks, both large and small. But on the whole, for the most part, they are just dots here and there in the city. And if only they were all connected by a web of green boulevards wide enough for critters to move around in, that would benefit, first of all, of course, giving more people close to green spaces close to where they live, and it would broadly benefit urban biodiversity, which is a big deal if we protect it and allow it. And it would also help sequester more carbon by providing more greenery. So it's multiple benefit to tackle more more about nature in cities. Now, that will not give us broad additional acres to add to our 30%, get us closer to that 30%, probably, but it has many other 30 by 30 benefits. So I just hope maybe CNRA and all of us who work on this can pay more attention to urban greening as we continue on.
Yes, absolutely. Vicky, we can't just look at this as an acres number exercise, right? Like, not every acre is equal, whether it has those threatened or endangered species or whether it has tremendous value to the community. So certainly that has to be a part of it, right? One of the great ways the state is, we have Wildlife Conservation Board that's thinking statewide, but then we also have these individual conservancies, and some do focus more in urban areas, which is great. That's making sure that it's not just acres per dollar benefit, but they are thinking about, okay, how can these communities really benefit? And we want to make sure. I love the vision of like, can, even if they're postage stamps, can they all connect and make some bigger space? And we certainly have some broad goals on that in the pathway strategy. So yes, must be a part of that equation. It provides so much benefit. I don't want people to think this is just an acres counting game, right? There's so much more to it than that.
Right.
All right. We've got time for one or two more questions. Hey, Glenn, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah, I noticed at least the impression of some of your maps was that there was less biodiversity protection in the Central Valley, and yet in a study, for example, of the botany of the Central Valley was found that even though the biodiversity overall was less, the level of rarity and extinction among plants was much higher. And I think that's also been identified by the World Wildlife Fund as one of the most endangered ecosystems on Earth. So I would hope that there be a little bit more attention to the Central Valley, which is where UC Davis and Tuleyome are headquartered.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the Central Valley is the most underrepresented region in the state when you look just by numbers. So certainly, yes, we want it to be a bottom up, but the state does have levers, right? We do have different grant programs. We do have the ability to have different convenings, right? And so when we're thinking about, okay, where do we see opportunity and where does it make sense to invest in partnerships or invest in planning or capacity or, new acquisitions easements that the state funds, that is something that we're thinking about and do recognize that the Central Valley is pretty underrepresented, not only as a region, but the grasslands habitat is the most underrepresented habitat that needs to be conserved in the state as well.
Good, thank you.
Can I add something in? So, for instance, Glenn, like the Sacramento region, our goal is 30 by 30 throughout the state. We only have 9%. Some of that is understandable because of we have a huge volume of urban and agricultural areas. That does not mean we cannot do better. And I think it goes to Vicky's point about looking more at urban areas. And also, I think there are some areas that we have that we need to think about valuing better and in different ways. So I think there are a lot of things out there. But yeah, so the Sacramento region is a lower percentage, but I think versus beating ourselves up for that, We need to realize the environment in which we live and figure out how can we elevate that in the areas. And I really appreciate your comments and Madeline's regarding them. And yours too, Glenn. But just want to acknowledge the unique circumstances we have here. Yellow faces some of those same pressures too because of the volume of ag lands and how the GAP programs are defined.
Yeah, really well said,
Thanks,
Sandy.
Sandy.
All right, very good. Do we have any other questions for Madeline? All right, very good. Thank you again, Madeline. If you missed the beginning of the talk, I'll be sending a link for the recording out likely tomorrow afternoon. Again, please stop by tuleyome.org to see everything that we are up to. Our July Nature and You lecture is going to feature the McLaughlin Reserve. With its director, Kathy Kohler. So be sure to enjoy it and join us for that. Thanks again, Madeline, and thanks to all of you for being here. And I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday evening.
Thank you,
Thank you for
everybody.
having
Thank you,
me.
Madeline and Jeff.
Thanks for having me. Great to spend the evening with you all.